Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, your global look at news from Taiwan. I'm Rik Glauert. Taiwan has elected its new president. Lai Ching-te of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party secured a historic third term in office for his party. Lai received 40% of the vote, beating opposition candidates Hioe of the Kuomintang and Ko Wen-je of the Taiwan People's Party. But his party failed to gain a majority in the nation's legislature. In his first speech as president-elect, Lai said he would maintain peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. To find out more about these elections and what a Lai presidency will mean for Taiwan and beyond, I speak to local journalist Brian Hioe. Brian, welcome to the show. So, big elections in Taiwan this weekend, a historic third term in office for the ruling Democratic Progressive Party. Could you tell us how it all played out?
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions ahead of time how it would play out. For example, the last polls before the blackout period that is imposed for 10 days before the elections showed Lai significantly ahead. And that was actually what the final result was very close to. Lai was ahead, and there was a clear gap between him and his opponents. At the same time, as we've seen from the dynamics of the election cycle this time around, if the Pan Blue camp had come together on a joint ticket, they could have perhaps ousted the DPP from its unprecedented third term in office.
And what does a Lai win mean for Taiwan, do you think?
So what's interesting is that it does show the DPP can manage to hold on to office. There is significant backlash against it for being the incumbent, for failing to address issues regarding socioeconomic inequality in particular. Young people, for example, many have gone to support Ko Wen-je and the Taiwan People's Party, despite it being a more pan-blue leaning party at present, because it seems to offer an anti-establishment message. And so it's true also at the same time, even if the DPP did not manage to hold its majority in the legislature, it still got more of the party vote compared to any other party. So it still does indicate there is support for the DPP. And as seen with the votes for Lai, that also indicates support for the DPP. But perhaps it is holding on through cross-strait issues primarily, through being the party that maintains Taiwan's sovereignty or defends it, and that it is taking a blow on these domestic issues that's benefiting the other parties.
And Lai answered questions from international media and he made a speech, a victory speech to the Taiwan people. Did he give much indication on what sort of president he wants to be?
I think there's many concerns that have been circulating internationally about whether he would be a dangerous pro-independent provocateur in line with past comments in support of Taiwan independence. And that was also leveraged on domestically in the KMT. And so that was one of the things, actually. In the speech, he didn't say very much, actually. He just vowed to do the same things that Tsai did for the most part, to maintain the status quo. He also indicated openness to dialogue with China, so long as there is dignity and respect. And stress that peace is to the mutual benefit of people on both sides of the Taiwan Straits, offering this kind of conciliatory olive branch. But that's also not anything new either. That was also seen under Tsai.
And as you mentioned, his party, the DPP, don't have a majority in the legislature going forward. Can you tell us how big a deal that this will be for Lai and his administration? Will it be crippling for them?
It's a really good question. And there is a precedent, which is Chen Shui-bian in 2000 and in the 2000s. Particularly, Chen won office because of a split in the pan-blue vote. And at that point in time, the DPP did not hold a majority in the legislature. The DPP has only held a majority in the legislature from 2016 to 2024, apparently. And so it's a question. The executive branch in government in Taiwan is relatively powerful. It can propose bills, for example. And so there are things that can still be done, and some measures can circumvent the legislature. But certainly the KMT will leverage on that to attack Lai, to say that, well, this is defying legislative procedure. You're just pushing things through by executive power, and that is likely to result in pushback.
And how have these results been received by the Taiwan population? What have you seen, in the newspapers and on the streets?
Some of the framing has to do with the view that Taiwan shrugged off Chinese election interference attempts, another choice for democracy, or that choosing Lai was in spite of these various attempts by China to tar him or defame him or to use disinformation to interfere with Taiwanese electoral democracy. But then I think people are still kind of wondering what will happen going forward. I think both camps will have to reevaluate their options now. It did turn out, for example, that the TPP gained seats in legislature and could control the crucial balance of power in the legislature. And Ko did quite well. Ho actually did quite poorly in that light. If they had a joint ticket, they could have ousted Lai. But even then, just Ko's recent stumbles when it comes to, for example, negotiating a joint ticket and various gaffes, that didn't actually hurt him too much. And so the TPP is a force to be reckoned with in Taiwanese politics now.
But for the main long-standing opposition party, the Kuomintang, and also for this new party, the TPP, Could you tell us a little bit about the political fallout and where Taiwan politics stands now?
So there are questions going forward about if there will be a reshuffle of the KMT leadership. Is it enough, for example, to oust the DPP from the majority in the legislature and claim that you can maintain your chair in the current leadership slate with these results, though you did lose the presidency? And so there could be a shakeup in the KMT, and particularly there'll be some rethinking about the fact that the TPP is now gaining. The KMT has tried to pressure the TPP into working with it or committing to working with it. And the TPP has declined, saying that it would still be willing to work with pan-green politicians on some issues because it needs to maintain its independence as a political party. Otherwise, it becomes no different and indistinguishable from the KMT. But then I think for the KMT, it will lead to some questions. And what happened in the past when it did experience defeats, and if this is interpreted as a defeat, mostly on the presidential election, is that there's a split between the moderates and the kind of diehards of the party, those that are more extremely pro-unification. And it's a question actually which one takes power. Lai Ching-te, for example, through his comments shortly before the actual election, stating that we should all have faith in Xi Jinping, saying that the arms budget, the military budget should be reduced, that provoked a lot of backlash. As a result, he was not invited to the final rallies of the KMT. But he's still around as well. There, he does this with his followers. And so I think a lot of the internal splits in the KMT will persist.
So we're going to zoom out a little bit here. Obviously, this election has been watched from around the world. Mm-hmm. This sort of vote in Taiwan has a big impact. What have you seen about how other countries have reacted to Lai's win?
So other countries have mainly tried to emphasize the point of Taiwan's democracy, that the election is a sign of the vitality of Taiwan's democracy, or they have emphasized that China should not interfere in Taiwan's democracy in that way. There are not particularly strong reactions. I think particularly countries will want to frame themselves as not favoring one candidate or another, particularly the U.S. It is quite politically fraught there for the U.S. at a time which the KMT has increasingly leaned into allegations that really tout skepticism of the U.S. in society. Along those lines, there are also various claims that have been circulated by, for example, the Pan Blue camp, that international media working with the DPP concocted the story about May Day, the Taiwanese band receiving Chinese pressure, for example. And so I think particularly those will really shape the reactions of countries. They want to come off as neutral, but also supportive of Taiwan, even if perhaps they would have preferred Lai to the KMT at the end of the day. They wouldn't say that part out loud.
And we know that China, before and after the vote, has voiced its dislike for Lai and another presidency for the DPP. What's your thoughts on Taiwan's relations with China for the next 4 years?
The ball is really in China's court in that sense. Lai has signaled that he wishes to be conciliatory, saying that he's open to communication if it's under principles of dignity. Previously, he stated that when asked who would he most like to have a meal with in the world, he answered Xi Jinping. And so he's sought to moderate his previous pro-independence image and indicate that he is open to dialogue. But then will China accept that? The answer is probably not. They will continue to frame him as a dangerous provocateur. There may be further trade measures, there may be further military measures aimed at undermining the DPP and causing it to appear weak, or that it is stoking tensions unnecessarily. And so that's expected to continue. But the question is really to what extent China will follow through on this. China does want to come off as tough at the end of the day, but to what extent will they really be going for that? Sometimes they do want to dial back tensions because perhaps things could spiral out of control, and is a fraught moment to the U.S. in which China is actually trying to avoid unnecessary tensions, even as variously it has sought to intimidate Taiwan during this time, as seen with the various balloons that passed over Taiwan. China is also in the process of a number of shakeups, such as with the rocket force, trying to weed out corruption in the military. And so it also does have a lot on its plate.
What do we know about Lai and how he's been received internationally? Is he expected to forge the links like his successor, Tsai Ing-wen?
I think he's actually been able to moderate his image. And so I do think actually the international world will accept his claim now to be Tsai 2.0, or at least some version of Tsai, or maintain continuity with Tsai, someone that doesn't break too much from the precedents of the Tsai administration. So I think that's actually worked. And I think a large part does go back to Xiaobi Kim, his vice president, who was appointed there precisely for that reason, to reassure of stable U.S.-Taiwan ties, but also because of her reputation as someone that is along the mold of Tsai. If there's one that's really more of a Tsai 2.0, it might be her. And so that's also why she's part of his campaign. But I think the PR strategy has worked. And so a lot of the framing of the Lai campaign has been very careful. There were some missteps, for example, when Lai expressed a desire to go to the White House. But otherwise, I think it has worked out.
Lai emphasized in his answers to questions on election night and in his speech to the public that he would pursue peace across the Taiwan Strait. Did he give us much indication on how he would ensure that peace? And do you think it will differ at all from the current administration?
I think probably not, because particularly when one looks at trade policy, there's more investment in Southeast Asia and other countries in the region than to going to China right now. And so I think the Lai administration will continue with that, this effort to decouple with China. This is framed as going along with international trends, and then that was used to attack the KMT, saying the KMT is actually not kept pace with the times. It is still calling for a return to this economic engagement with China when that is no longer a paradigm that holds. And so I think that will continue. But on the surface, then at least, Lai will again, trying to be conciliatory. But the target audience might actually be China, because China is not expected to take up that offer for dinner, for example, with Xi Jinping. Instead, the messaging is directed at the US and the international world to show that he will not push on cross-strait issues in a way that risks conflict.
How likely do you think a conversation is, renewed communication at a high level between Taiwan and China?
I think it's quite unlikely. I think China is not willing to take that up. It's very hard to see how that would occur, particularly with the DPP. And in many ways, I think that goes back to China having really drawn a line in the sand that it refuses to cross, and really dug its heels in on that. Because what is interesting is the DPP has engaged in willingness to conduct dialogue. And honestly, KMT politicians love to attack this too, but there are DPP politicians that do business with China, and China could leverage on those links. If there's a way to really come off as less threatening to the DPP, there was room for dialogue. There are moments too, and to be honest, in the past 2 decades in which the DPP seemed like it was drifting towards a more conciliatory position on China, before other forces in the party kind of warded off that from occurring. And so China's really kind of cut off ties in a way where it could even try to influence the DPP. I think just painting it all in one brush has led to this, and I think China's not willing to back down from that framing at this point in time.
So the US has released a statement on these elections here in Taiwan. Could you tell us a little bit about what they said and why it might be important?
Yeah, the US has emphasized its existing positions that is also not supportive of Taiwanese independence. And what's interesting is the KMT also drew on that to claim at various points that, well, the US does not favor the DPP in spite of strengthening ties between the Tsai administration and the Biden administration. And so the US has emphasized that then it is not supportive of Taiwanese independence either, in terms of not wanting a signal that it has, let's say, given a blank check to Lai to do whatever he wants. And so I think that's to be expected. It's re-emphasizing the U.S. existing positions. Not any change, though. I think what's more interesting to note is the delegation that is visiting in the immediate aftermath of the election, though. That's also an attempt to send a signal to China of the U.S. committing to support of Taiwan in means that do not provoke, and that diplomatic exchanges are still on the table with the administration. And visit would have occurred regardless of who won. And so that also signals continued engagement with Taiwan as a whole, not based on just a political party.
Do you care to have a go at suggesting how things might change within the next 4 years under Lai?
It's a good question, because Lai has not really made anything particularly clear in terms of a new or distinctive policy. It's mostly just been emphasizing what Tsai's policies are. And in his speech, he also said that he would incorporate the viewpoints of his opponents into his platform. And that is interesting because, to be honest, the parties did not differ from each other substantially outside of cross-strait issues on the issue of nuclear power. They mostly agreed on what the social ills facing Taiwan are and had various proposals to address that. But then they can always try to one-up each other, or they can take from each other's proposals, because they actually do agree on what the problems are. And so I think there may be that. The KMT might not be happy if Lai starts lifting elements of their program, but he signaled that he's interested in doing that and framing it as bipartisanship, his unwillingness to engage in partisan conflict, and actually framing this as a further, not just stealing the policy of his opponents, but as a way of working with his opponents. The KMT is not really likely to take that up, but I think it sets the tone. But otherwise, I think Lai, he does have a more comprehensive program, I think, than people actually do focus on. There's much discussion of the social ills facing Taiwan and not the programmatic aspect of the DPP's electoral campaign. But it's still not terribly distinctive, I think.
Thank you very much for joining us, Brian. This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, follow TaiwanPlus News on social media. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.